hour, and then I'll hand over to Jerry Haw, who'll do a roughly 20-minute presentation for you just on these farm plans. This is the second year that we've done farm plans. Last year we had a number that got plans and used them to basically think about their farms and how they could improve their business through implementing hedgerows and trees in certain areas. And this is the second year, and we hope to run it for the next couple of years. So just a quick introduction. I'll just open the slides here just to talk through. Hopefully this will work here. So we call it Trees for Farms, and just a quick introduction about the Woodland Trust. There's about 10 of us here in Northern Ireland, and we are based in Bangor, and we've been here about 20 years, and our main aims as a charity are woodland protection, so preventing damage and the felling of woods unnecessarily. We also restore ancient woodland, a project that I did for 4 years, trying to find our oldest woods, which are very rare. Actually, our land cover is 0.04% would be considered ancient woodland, so it's very rare and part of our heritage. So we do our best to protect and enhance that. And then lastly, which is the bulk of our work and what this comes from, would be the woodland creation. And my role is an outreach advisor, so I travel a lot just to various private landers, a lot of farmers and estate owners and anybody with an interest in trees or use, and I can essentially find any means possible or try and help people to avail of grant funding to get trees, get woodlands and hedgerows planted. And there's a range available through ourselves and through the government. So what we offer is large and small scale planting. So we had our largest woodland planting scheme there at the start of this year. It was about 100 acres down near Lecale, and it was all funded through the Forest Service's forest expansion scheme, with over 100,000 trees going in, and all native, a mix of native trees. We would try to focus on creating native woodlands because of their value for resilience against disease, biodiversity, and things of that nature. But we also go down to very small woodlands, up to sort of about half an acre and above. One thing we often do is hedgerows and shelter belts, which you'll hear about from Jerry. We have our own schemes that we support hedges, but the environmental farming scheme from DERA would cover them 100% funding for certain lengths of the hedgerows and the benefits they provide. And then quite topical at the minute would be sustainable firewood, with the increase in wood burning stoves and sustainable home heating. Planting a small woodland can make you sustainable for your own domestic heating, but also the price of firewood's gone up in recent years, so there's the potential for business there as well. Riparian planting, which is essentially riverside planting, is a big focus for us too. And as a landowner, there are great benefits in that. You'd be holding back sediment loss into river systems during periods of flooding. Trees along riversides will also hold back agricultural pesticides and things like that, and pollutants from the watercourse as well. So there are great benefits in riparian planting, and so with the likes of species movement throughout the landscape, animals would like to move up and down river courses. And agroforestry is something that we haven't done a lot of yet, but there's been extensive trials in Lecale about the benefits of planting trees in pasture land, with the results being many weeks extra of livestock being able to be kept out in the autumn time coming into winter due to drier ground conditions, and also shelter from wind and extremes of heat and cold. we also branch into just the individual tree planting in landscapes that suit it as well, with the likes of these tree cages, and parkland and wood pasture would be a very valuable habitat. But the woodland plans themselves, you'll see that's an example of one at the bottom there. This is essentially what we're often offering through today. We've set aside funding to basically pay Jerry to take a select group of farmers that are interested and it would be suitable for, and we're happy to fund Jerry to go out and to meet and to walk your ground and see where benefits could be made through the introduction of trees in any form. So it won't be available to everybody, because if you come to us with just the need for a hedge and you know exactly what you want, a plan won't be necessary, but we'll be happy to help you. So we will be selective about who gets a plan, but if you would be very keen on having your whole farm looked at, and we could use that plan then to apply for funding, that's really what we would love to get from this. Just finish with a couple of slides of things that have been done through our work. This is an example of riparian planting, again along the river course. You can probably just about make out the trees along here in the sperrins, and a bit of a close-up, you'll see the clear erosion going on during peak flows of flooding, and we would aim to target areas like these to hold back ground, and all the benefits are sort of there's multiple benefits to that. So the plan will include maps, and this is one from last year. A farmer near Lecale who used 1,200 meters of new fencing along 2 water courses, including tree planting and small areas of woodland in the corners of those fields as well. That's Jerry out doing his work, nearly done. But just to finish off, I would like to just point out the grant offers that we're hoping to use and avail of. The Forest Expansion Scheme at the top is open now until the end of August, and it basically includes woodlands of 3 hectares and above. It's our most competitive scheme at the minute, 100% funded, also to include fencing and scrub clearance and ground prep. You maintain your single farm payment, and you'll also receive 10 years of payments towards offset of your earnings. It's a competitive scheme, but it's the best that we have at the minute, and it does pay for some really impressive schemes. And as I said, we did a 40 hectare, 100 acre roughly scheme last year. So it's definitely worth considering if you have that sort of project in mind. And at the bottom there, the environmental farming scheme, which usually opens in about August time, will be used for the likes of hedgerows and tree line boundaries, individual tree planting, and a whole suite of other options there. It's also very competitive. And lastly, I don't have it written here, but we have word that there is potentially a very good woodland grant coming out in September, which doesn't have a name yet, but it will hopefully bring all year round with woods of 0.2 hectares and above, 100% funded as well, potentially to include other elements such as fencing as well. So that could be another good option for anybody that's interested. So thanks very much. I'd like to pass over to Jerry now. Jerry Haw, who's a forestry consultant for us, and he's done quite a lot of these plans for us and different consultation exercises as well. And he'll hopefully take about 20 minutes just to explain what the farm plans will involve. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I'll just load this up here. Okay, good evening, folks, and yeah, thanks to Michael for the introduction. I'm going to run through a some similar topics to Michael, perhaps in a little more detail. Hopefully not taking 20 minutes. I'll try and wrap it up a wee bit sooner than that if I can, to leave time for questions at the end. But so to maybe set the theme for this presentation, trees and woodland needn't be a peripheral of the farm. They can form planned and effective green infrastructure features with direct benefits to the agribusiness. So to try and put that in context, I'm sure that trees are generally a welcome and even a cherished part of the farm, but I wonder how often they're seen as having an active role in the farm business. And I'd like to put across how trees and woodland can have an active and integrated role on the farm, with direct environmental and economic benefits. So the two main beneficial areas that I'm going to concentrate on are shelter and shade for livestock and the reduction in the overland flow of water. Starting with shelter and shade, this is a photograph I took during a farm survey on a particularly wet, windy, nasty day last winter. My screen's just gone down there. I'll just share this again. Sorry about that. So back to Clocky. And yes, on this particular day, I was painfully aware that there was only 2 post and wire fences and this hedge between me and Scotland. You know, thankfully this chap was putting in place a quite extensive program of hedgerow restoration, new hedging and new native woodland planting. So he clearly appreciated the need for greater shelter on the farm. So haven't seen really a zero shelter situation. It's looking at how wind interacts with both man-made and natural features in the landscape. So in terms of solid features, such as a wall or a building, they do deflect a certain amount of wind, but the wind that moves over them becomes very turbulent. It accelerates rapidly toward the ground, and it gives a very short wind shaft protection zone. Conversely, hedgerows, semi-permeable features, they filter some of the wind. The rest of the wind flows over the top. They have much cleaner air on the leeward side, and they have a much larger protection zone. So really looking at the optimum shelter effect of a well-structured hedge or shelter belt, I think the key here is the word structure. You know, effective screens have both height in terms of some tree cover, and they have low shrubby growth in terms of a well-established and managed native hedge. And with this sort of feature, you'd expect about 40% wind penetration. As I say, the remainder goes over the top. The 2 flows combine to create clean air with low turbulence. The effective distance depends on the height. 20% reduction in wind speed for distances around 20 times the height of the hedge. So even a meter hedge would have a 60-meter wind shadow. And I think hopefully it's clear to see from the diagram. You know, it's really a much improved microclimate for livestock on that leeward side. Air temperature, soil moisture, humidity, night air temperature, evaporation, they're all more consistent, and that's the key. These environmental factors are all more consistent both in the winter and the summer in terms of both shelter and shade. A lot of this work has been done around and come out of the Pont project. So this is a farmer-led project in mid-Wales. And these guys have really over time developed some of the optimum green infrastructure solutions, which have allowed them to both lamb and calve outdoors. They have slightly reduced pastures because a lot of these feature a small bit wider than the normal hedge, maybe up to 4 meters as opposed to maybe 2.5. But they find they have increased grazing because of the favorable environmental conditions they're creating, and they also have a longer season. So just to go through the direct benefits of increased shelter to the farm, again from the Pont project, there's been quite a bit of research, mainly led by the University of Bangor, and they've been able to show a 30% reduction in lamb losses, with twins and triplets deriving the greatest benefit. They've seen the live weight gains of 10 to 21% per animal. These gains have been both in winter due to increased shelter and in summer due to shading, where overheating apparently causes weight gains to be less. They've seen greater live weight gains per unit of food given. There's been reduced supplementary feeding in terms of licks and such like. As I say, they have increased sward per unit area, and perhaps an increasingly important one, these features give mitigation against extreme weather events such as heat waves and heavy snow, which unfortunately we may see more of in terms of climate change. And I haven't compiled an exhaustive list here. We would hope to make available the research case studies that go through these the project in more detail. So on to the control of overland flow of water. Water fluctuations, serious impact on grassland productivity, sward growth, length of season, parasite load. Overland flow is one of the main factors in the loss of nutrients from farmland to watercourses, or indeed from farm to inter-Drumland Valley, other parts of the farm. And again, a lot of this work coming out of the Pont project. In fact, for me, this is one of the most remarkable findings, is that really quite soon after the shelter belts, the hedge became established, they found that water penetration into the ground was up to 60 times higher than that on grassland 10 meters away. So the tree roots becoming established were allowing water to penetrate the ground at a really quite remarkable rate. And what this allowed is then strategic planting, cross contour, largely native trees and mineral soils, which transfers water from high rainfall events into deep soil to be released more slowly over a longer period. And this then has benefits both in summer periods like we're experiencing just now, and indeed in winter whenever there's a longer grazing season on lower slopes, which may historically have been waterlogged. Results in increased grass yield, longer season, reduced habitat for fluke, reduction of nutrient loss, and potentially to watercourses. There's a number of additional benefits to trees and woodlands on the farm. This first one would be important to us foresters and ecologists. Habitat provision and linkage. Clearly, Ireland's native semi-natural woodlands have been pretty well decimated over a period of centuries. There's very little remaining, so they certainly need conservation management and ideally extension through new planting. The habitat linkages, they're quite relevant to what we're talking about in terms of hedgerows, shelter belts, pockets of native woodland planting, because our natural woodlands are very fragmented, and if we can join them together, then they have a much greater habitat value as a whole. On-farm landscape enhancement, we'd like to think that trees and woodlands, they provide a pleasant place to work, maybe with increased value on an individual property. Wider landscape enhancement, again, our landscape's attractive, it's a pleasant place to be. You would hope that people from outside will come and they spend money there, spend time there. The fourth one, I said to the guys before I could talk about it all night. I won't, but suffice to say that unfortunately we're going to lose the vast majority of our ash trees in the coming years. And in simple terms, the sooner we plant more trees of a greater range of species, and particularly, well, more hedgerow trees and woodlands, then we can smooth that ecological and landscape transition. Disease reduction, reduced nose-to-nose herd contact between neighbouring properties. Michael touched on domestic fuelwood production, and yes, very relevant to what he said. It's surprising actually what a small broadleaf woodland will start to produce once it comes into a thinning cycle, maybe after about 50 years. Possibly just a 2-hectare woodland, depending on species, would certainly support a domestic heating and hot water situation. On into the commercial fuel wood, possibly saw timber production for bigger projects. This can have both on-farm or off-farm value. I just really threw in this next slide to illustrate the sort of higher end of on-farm value. This is a wood chip boiler unit on quite a large arable and dairy farm in Finland. This particular unit provides all of the hot water needs for, I think, 6 domestic dwelling and office spaces, and for the dairy. And actually, it uses very early thinnings that wouldn't have been saleable otherwise. They're essentially a waste product before the forest on the property comes into production. So this is the premium end of fully integrated farm forestry. So again, just to go into maybe a small bit more detail to finish off in relation to what Michael was telling us about the funding mechanisms. A very typical one that's applied within the farm woodland plans would be the EFS wider scheme. A number of really good options there. By the way, for the scheme, you need a category 1 or 2 DAERA business ID. Establishment of native woodland less than 5 hectares, very useful for small pockets of native woodland planting. Michael had alluded to forest expansion scheme, possibly a new scheme. Then typically for those maybe without a DAERA business ID, Woodland Trust More Woods and More schemes kick in. Again, a few options there that are quite typical within the farm woodland plans. Hedge laying, that would be one that may be applied to try and restore old, leggy, moribund hedges. Establishment of agroforestry, again one that's now gaining some popularity. I have a slide to show you on that, just to give a sort of an idea of what it looks like. Planting new hedgerows, very popular, very often applied within the farm woodland plans. Agroforestry, actually, the term agroforestry encapsulates everything that we're talking about just now. It's really any interaction between trees and agriculture. I think our view of it is silvopasture, which we see here, with livestock and trees on the same area of ground. Michael outlined the benefits of this. They're very similar to all those that we've just talked about. And again, these are the trials, the AFB trials at Lecale. A few elements of the farm woodland plan then. Brief description of the site, a quick soil survey. Most importantly, there's always a good discussion around the owner's objectives. Quite often, they're already quite an advanced stage in terms of the owner knowing what they want and where they want it, and really my role is to bring that into a practical, workable plan, which is able to go on then and secure the grant mechanism. Again, the mapping and the quantities very important in terms of the scheme applications. Species lists, I'll show you one in a minute, which are suited to the local conditions. The plan then aims to give some practical guidance on the implementation of the project. If there are existing woodlands, hedgerow trees on the farm that require conservation management, we would aim to give some advice on that. And ultimately, the plan is designed to facilitate application to the schemes and ensure successful project delivery. Mapping, Michael's shown you already. This is some native woodland planting, actually an area of agroforestry. This is down near Castlewellan. A couple of areas of existing woodland that, again, we give some advice. There are some tree enhanced boundaries here, which actually I don't think are available in the scheme anymore. I should have said then the mapping that's also cross-referenced with the farm map, the LIPIS map. Most importantly, in relation to field numbers, because we can gather together all of the information that feeds into, in this case, the EFS wider online portal. So as we're able to take the things ready to go as soon as the scheme opens. This is a species list. Generally, I would try to identify a target woodland type. So a semi-natural woodland type for the local conditions. There may be 2 or 3 of those. There could be wet woodland. It could be oak woodland, acid oak woodland, on a single property, and we would have separate species lists for each of those areas. And that's me. Thank you for listening. And as I said before, I think we'll aim to make available some very good publications that have fed into this presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael and Jerry. Does anybody have any questions? You can put your hand up, or if you haven't got very good internet connection, you could write it in the chat either. That helps. Maybe everybody's okay. Oh yeah. Same. Yeah, do you want to go ahead, Seamus, and ask your question?
Yeah, is this scheme, is it like a DARD scheme, or is it a separate one? It seems to resemble some of the EFS scheme that I'm already in,
I am. If you're talking about the farm the farm woodland plan itself. This is purely something that we've put together, the Woodland Trust. So we'll be funding it ourselves. If we think your farm merits one, we'd be happy to produce that on behalf of Jerry Haw and in discussion with yourself. But we basically are creating this plan with the aim that it can be there for you to use to inform you to apply for grants such as the environmental farming scheme. So if you're already in the environmental farming scheme, that probably limits what you have available to you, but that would be one of the main mechanisms for funding these works. But there are, as we said, there's other ones like the FES and potentially another one coming out in September as well. So have you got much through the environmental farming scheme already?
Yeah, well, I've done various bits on that, and I'm planting a small part of the farm in trees. It's very small at the moment. It's in the scheme as well, and I've done dry stone wall and stuff. So, I think maybe I'm limited to what I can do now.
Any thoughts, Jerry?
Yeah, well, certainly you can't have another bite at the EFS wider. So, in terms of future planting, it would probably be this new Forest Service scheme that's coming up if you were interested in doing more planting. What I would say is I would imagine there are going to be successor schemes to EFS. Obviously, with Brexit, with changes in subsidies and such like, it sounds as if there's going to be an emphasis on environmental work. So there's got to be schemes to support that. I think that's probably a given. So that if there are things that you're looking at and thinking about, I think there are definitely going to be opportunities in the future to gain funding for those, and they may be quite important in terms of your overall subsidies.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think the benefit, isn't it, that it's a whole farm scheme or plan rather than like little bits and stuff like that, isn't it? Yeah. We have a question. How can you arrange a farm visit? So I think initially what we're going to get people to do is contact yourself, Michael, isn't it?
Yeah. Hopefully my details will be. I can send them. They were at the end of my talk there, but if you would like, if you'd be interested in a plan, if you could contact me, feel free to call me any day of the week between sort of 9 and 5, or even if the evenings, if it doesn't suit you. But it would just be nice to talk to you, just to hear what you have, what your farm conditions are like, and any past management or other schemes that have already happened. Ultimately, it'd be good to have a copy of your farm maps if you wouldn't mind sending them to me. You could email them to me, and then we could have a look at the local conditions and see if there are any constraints or opportunities. But just to chat on the phone would be the first step, so feel free to ring me on my mobile.